Hello and welcome to Community Crossroads. I'm Carolina Astrain. On this week's show, we get a May 6th election recap. We also hear from the Victoria County Elections Administrator. We learn about a Juneteenth celebration happening in Port Lavaca, and we also take a look at our viewer poll. And now we begin with our May 6th election recap with Woodrow Wilson Wagner. He's a political science lecturer at the University of Houston, Victoria. Welcome to Community Crossroads.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So such an interesting election, this May 6th election. There were two big parts for Victoria County voters, but we're going to start with the school board election. Wow. Two incumbents, one in office since, I believe, 2003?
Right.
Wow, both unseated. What do you think spurred this change?
Well, you're right. It's so rare in any election for an incumbent to be defeated, especially in school board. So it's been a while for here in Victoria since our incumbents were defeated in school board. I think one of the things is that people are extremely frustrated with what's going on in VISD, whether it be what's going on in the schools, whether it's being going on in the curriculum. And I think both of these challengers ran on changing things, that the status quo was no longer acceptable. So I think there was so much frustration, and then the low voter turnout definitely helped the challengers. We only had 8% of the registered voters vote. And anytime when you have that low of a voter turnout, challengers are going to be helped by that. So in any other election cycle, maybe the incumbents would have done better, but in this particular one, the low voter turnout really did help those challengers.
And the last school board related election that we've seen here was related to the bond.
Right.
And that only succeeded partially with Mission Valley's rebuilding being passed, but Stroman High School kind of left behind. A lot of bitterness.
A lot of bitterness. I think there was some residual bitterness that both of the challengers capitalized on. They saw that the community was divided on that. They saw that as an opportunity to run against two incumbents who have, popularity and lots of support from folks. So I think you're exactly right. That bond issue was kind of an opening for them to challenge these two incumbents.
So some time has passed since the election. There's already been a school board meeting.
Yeah.
Can you give us some highlights?
Well, one of the highlights was one of the first things that these two new trustees did was to nominate a new person for president of the school board. Currently, Mr. Mike Mercer is the president of the school board, but they had nominated Miss Mandy Lingle to be school board. Now, that motion and that vote failed. Mr. Mike Mercer is still the president, but this gives us a taste, I think, of things to come. That they ran on changing the status quo, challenging what was going on previously, and this is what their first act is to try to make a new school board president. So that was one of the highlights. Another one was trying to push an investigation of critical race theory, which was one of the big issues for this campaign. And one of the things that I think the superintendent has said and other trustees have said is that critical race theory is not being taught in VISD. Our TEKS do not allow for such things, but yet it's still pushed by these two new trustees. I would just ask voters and citizens to think about, okay, is this a real thing that's happening in VISD or is it not? And we've got to do our own research on that. I can't tell people what to think. People need to research for themselves to see if indeed something like that's happening. But I can tell you, Carolina, that I am seeing no evidence of critical race theory being taught in VISD schools.
Well, it is a very contentious, hot topic issue, and there's a movement against CRT across the country.
Right.
On the agenda in this most recent meeting, it was approving history textbook. So, I mean, imagine if it wasn't a 4-2 vote. So I'm curious about other school districts across the state, across the country that maybe have the odds stacked higher in favor of this new movement.
Right. And that is a concern that I think parents and students all over Texas have, is the idea of changing our history, omitting some parts of our history while including others. And again, we have to look what's actually being taught in the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills.
Well, also what's at stake here, because these books, all of these things have a schedule. They have to be, you know, there's a schedule to all of these things, just like voting in a new school board president, that's all on a schedule. So there's a bit of a learning curve for these candidates, but they are holding true to their promises to voters. So we'll see if they are able to adjust and kind of learn how things are done in the school board.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that any new person learns in their role is that change is very difficult. And sometimes if you want to change for change's sake, that might not go as far as changing with a very specific reason in mind. And I think that's something that they're probably going to be learning in the next few months.
All right, Woodrow, well, we'll hear more from you here shortly. We'll be right back after this break. Now with Woodrow Wilson Wagner. He's a University of Houston of Victoria political science lecturer. He's here to talk to us about the May 6th election. All right, Woodrow. So we covered the school board election, and now we're moving on to Victoria College's 3-story Student Success Center. Wow, what an achievement for the Victoria College community, a new building, such a rare thing for Victoria County voters to approve.
Absolutely. And I think Victoria College really had an excellent strategy in doing this. First of all, they raised the majority of the funds themselves and only asked the voters to bill $10 million, which $10 million is still a lot, but that's a third of what the cost was. So that was their first good move. Their other good move, and I really give Dr. Jennifer Kent and Amy Mundy from Victoria College a lot of credit, they had a very good PR campaign. They went group by group, individual by individual, all over the community talking about what this would mean. And they had very compelling analysis, visuals, costs, all those things broken down. So it was a very transparent and very proactive communication effort on their part, where you see the results of that. The bond passed, and it passed pretty overwhelmingly for them.
And comparing higher ed goals to K through 12 goals here in the Crossroads, I think people are willing to bet more on the growth of higher education as Victoria College grows, the University of Houston Victoria grows. I think one of the really special silver linings of this story is the fact that they're going to have their own library.
Absolutely.
Previously shared. I mean, it was a shared library system. UHV got their own new library. Now it's time for Victoria College.
Absolutely. And it's not just about a building or facility, it's about services. And VC and UHV primarily serve first-generation underserved students. And having all of those things under a roof matters for a first-gen or an underserved student to be able to have that kind of access. So I think our outreach to those kind of communities is going to be improved, and you're going to see higher enrollments, especially with first-gen and underserved students.
And that STEM technology, that post-education workforce training, all of that, adding a balance to the wonderful traditional academic four-year experience UHV offers. But UHV is also on the STEM technology. So we're looking forward to seeing construction start on the facility and learning more about it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Woodrow, for your time and for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right, coming up, don't go anywhere. We hear from Margetta Hill, the Victoria